the Hail Mary is, can we scare people with abortion? And as you said, it's a settled question here.
Yeah, and I think the Democrats tried to do that already back in March and April of this year. And again, I'm out knocking on doors in March and April. Yeah. And they're not talking about this at the door.
Yeah.
They're talking about border security. They're talking about inflation. There's nothing on the shelves kind of thing. I'm worried about my kids' education because after COVID, and I spent those 2 years totally engaged in my child's education. I know what they were being taught, what they weren't being taught. I know where their challenges are. I know where they're going to succeed. And so, that's what parents are talking about. They're talking about, look, I want to be able to be in charge of my child's education.
The most competitive congressional race this year will, I believe, be the 8th congressional up in Weld and Adams. I'm trying to remember.
A little bit of Larimer County.
And a little bit of Larimer County.
Yeah, over there in Berthoud.
State Senator Barb Kirkmeyer, congratulations on the primary win.
Thank you.
It was a sizable win in a really tough primary.
It felt good.
I imagine it felt good.
It did. It felt good.
All right. Before we get to that, you were a county commissioner in Weld County.
Correct.
Weld County is a different place than the rest of the state. Or should I say it's more like America and less like Berkeley. And so this district that you're going to be running for is a little bit different than your Senate district. It's a little bit different than this. You're going to be going into some other areas which make it really competitive. How are you going to reach out to middle voters?
Yeah, I was able to do that in my Senate race because my Senate district includes all of the city and county of Broomfield.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And a large portion of it is Weld County. I mean, it's changing with the redistricting, but a large portion of it was city and county of Broomfield. And, I just go out and start knocking on doors and talking to people right at their door. That's what makes the difference.
It really is funny. I've known several people who say, I voted for her. She came to the door. What did you like about her? She came to the door. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make a difference. It's a lot of shoe leather. It is not an easy thing to do, and you have to be the one. The problem is there's, 600,000 people in your district?
721,000 approximately, yes.
That's a few too many doors.
It is quite a few, but I did a lot of walking before in the primary, petitioned onto the ballot. So I figure my daughter and I have already hit about 10,000 doors, which is a good start. Probably won't walk as much in Weld County because, I've walked there 5 or 6 different elections now, so they know me. But, we'll hit in Adams County quite a bit because, I just need to get out and get to know folks and get to know the community. And that's what the other thing that walking does is when you're talking to people at the door, they tell you specifically what's impacting them at their home and their family, and then you get to see what's going on in the community as well.
Talk about something that was not uniquely Weld County, but most important Weld County, which is the war on fossil fuels, the fracking ban that the governor put in. You guys have had to deal with it as county commissioners and now as senators. The devastation it's done to that part of the state, to working people who made good living in oil and gas, who are now leaving, the investment that is pulling out stakes and going someplace else. But this district also has Broomfield, which is much more skeptical as a stereotype of that. Tell me how bad is it when it comes to energy? This is one of the key things you will be dealing with as a congresswoman.
Really, and you're exactly right. And the new district, the congressional district, is Adams County. It's not Broomfield County, it's Adams County. But I think people need to understand it sits right on top of the Wattenberg Field in the Denver-Julesburg Basin. So the sweet spot, the part where, it's very great oil, is right there in southern Weld and northern Adams County. And if you go back and look at Proposition 112, remember the setback, don't set our state back kind of thing?
Right.
It failed in Adams County like 60-40. And in this district, if you go back and look at numbers, because we've done it, it would have failed in this congressional district as well. So I feel pretty good.
Probably by a less amount.
No, it would have still been about 60-40
really?
Because when you add in Weld County, in Weld County, Proposition 112 was defeated by 70%, 70-30 kind of thing.
So when you add in that, it's a heartblood of that part of the state.
Well, and that whole Wattenberg Field, it is right there, sitting right on top of Weld and Adams County. It's this district. This is probably the 5th most producing field in the nation, or at least it was. until Jared Polis came into town, and my opponent, quite frankly, my Democrat opponent, who was the co-prime sponsor on Senate Bill 181.
Let's talk about Senate Bill 181 for a second, because for those who don't remember the history, there was 112, which was a proposition put on the ballot through a citizens' initiative to do setbacks. What it was to destroy the oil and gas industry in Colorado. And oil and gas, I think, foolishly spent so much money to defeat that, they didn't put any money protecting the rear guard.
Exactly.
And so when the state legislature, particularly the Senate, went Democratic, they passed Senate Bill 181, which I will argue is more devastating than 112. And what it does is it sets up brand new rules and a brand new anti-oil and gas committee that gets to decide who gets to live and who gets to leave. And it's no wonder why oil prices are so high, why gas prices are so high in Colorado. And it's also no wonder why companies are leaving.
They don't want to do business in Colorado?
Whether it's Noble or Anadarko, or particularly the smaller mom and pop oil and gas operations that would take on the, riskier plays. That, I got a small play here and a small play there. Yeah, if you're Exxon, you've already bought up all your wells, they're there. But these mom and pops are hurting, and oil and gas got screwed by 112.
And it's not
your opponent was a prime sponsor of that.
Prime co-sponsor, yes, she was.
This is her bill.
This was, after we voted and said no to setbacks, within 6 months, the legislature said, 2,500 was probably too much. We'll just go to 2,000.
2,000 feet.
Yeah, we'll just disregard what the voters said and move on. But I'm going to back.
They do the same thing when it comes to taxes.
They do it a lot of places.
And call it fees. Yeah.
They meaning the Democrats within the legislature. But I'm going to back you up, even though. And part of the reason I think the industry might have been a little bit tired or frustrated is because actually the setbacks and the argument with regard to giving standing to people who would essentially have a say over someone else's private property rights.
Right.
That started under Governor Hickenlooper.
Right.
We've been fighting those rules for a long time. And, I get accused because, you're out there fighting for the oil and gas industry. No, we were out there fighting for those oil and gas jobs and the people who live in our community, because they are great paying jobs.
They also say there's a real war on rural Colorado. And you from Greeley and Adams County and the rest, now Broomfield for your Senate district. But there are people out there who built their lives on oil and gas. They built their lives on farming and ranching. And all of these lifestyles are under attack in Colorado, and I'll argue under attack nationwide as well. All right. You fought 181. It's devastating your constituents now. But when you get this job, if you get this job, that's not going to be the issue. So what's the oil and gas issue nationwide that you're going to be working on?
It's still basically jobs and getting back to national security and getting back to energy independence. Because now, instead of being independent with regard to energy, whether that's fossil fuels or even solar or wind, any of the other types of energy out there, we now are dependent upon China, Russia. We've got a president who thinks it's a great idea to go make a deal with Iran, maybe Venezuela. Our enemies, instead of producing it here where it's clean. We have a clean industry here with all of the regulations that we have. At one point, we all talked about the most robust rules in the nation, probably in the world, and yet we can't produce clean energy here because we'd rather, as a nation, go buy dirty energy for someone else.
Not to talk about our age at all, but when we were younger, the idea of American energy independence was fanciful. It was science fiction. It just couldn't happen. But with hydraulic fracturing, with horizontal drilling, with these new technologies, it became a reality.
Absolutely.
It became a reality. And you use the term national security. Why do you use that term with energy? What's the connection?
Think what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And if you're in Germany, how you're probably thinking, oh my God, where am I going to get my oil and gas from? Think how it's impacting the fertilizer, that our farmers need, right? Because they can't get it because of the natural gas and things that aren't being produced.
What does that have to do with fertilizer, natural gas?
You need natural gas to create fertilizer. And so
most people don't know that.
Exactly. And so prices are going through the roof. So now we're becoming more dependent upon places like Russia. I mean, at one point we were getting, 60 billion barrels or something from Russia, and we've cut that off. But now, we're searching to go to other people who are not our allies.
What's so bizarre is to see our president close down pipelines,
stop federal leases,
close the Keystone Pipeline, say that on forest lands we're not drilling any longer. At the same time, he hops on a plane to go to the Middle East and ask them to give us more oil.
Yes. And they don't even have the type of regulations that we have with regard to air quality and water quality rules and regulations that we have. Not even close. So basically, I refer to it as dirty energy versus clean energy and the jobs that it would create here in the United States.
About half of all new coal plants are in China.
Mm-hmm.
And so we keep getting cleaner and cleaner while they get dirtier and dirtier, and somehow we're supposed to pay the price for that.
And price for gas just keeps going up and up and up. Right. When I first started walking doors in January and talking to people, they were complaining because it was costing them $85, $90 to fill up their gas tank. By June, it's $115 to $125. It's like every week. They can just see it going up every week. It's incredible. So that to me is like one of the number one issues that's facing this district and quite frankly our state and our nation.
All right, so you get in there, you'll be voting for that. Talk to me about inflation. For me, I've been waiting for inflation ever since Obama started really bringing up the money supply. And you double the amount of dollars in the society, sooner or later prices double. And it was bound to happen. I was, to be honest, very surprised how long it took. I'm not surprised. And there's plenty of blame to go around from Republican presidents and Democratic presidents for putting in people in the Fed who constantly inflate. There's also enough to complain that when Republicans were in control, they bought a lot of silly things and expanded spending.
Increased spending.
Mm-hmm. But right now, we haven't seen anything like this since the
40
70s.
years.
Right.
For 40 years.
What are you going to do about it? Because you will have a key role in this. What do you do? What is the policy?
So I believe one of the great things that's occurring, and I just came back from Washington, D.C. last week in talking with other Republican leaders like McCarthy, Leader McCarthy, and others that are in Congress right now. And we are putting together the same kind of strategy that we started putting together here in this state with our commitment to Colorado. We're looking at a commitment to America. And how do we reduce spending? How do we really put together a plan to stop inflation? Because right now, there isn't a plan. It's like just keep spending, which, the more you spend, the more inflation goes up. And, I don't care if you change the definition of recession, we're still going to have a recession. I mean, people don't need to understand, that you've changed the definition of recession because you're Joe Biden and you think you can do that. They understand that it's costing them more. That it is costing them more to provide food on their table, that it's costing them more to put gas in their gas tank, right? Everything is costing them more. They understand that where their salaries, what they're making is not increasing at the same rate as inflation. So essentially, they're dealing with 1/12, with 1 month less of their salary to make a living, to have a living in this country. That's, on a national average. In Colorado, it's getting higher. We're higher here.
I remember when Bill Clinton won and James Carville, when asked, so why is this happening? What's the big deal? His response was, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
And at some point, we need to say, it's the spending, stupid.
Yes. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. We need to stop the debt, stop the spending. I led my county to zero debt. We have no debt at all within Will County. We reduced taxes.
Stop there,
yes.
Because we did a study. We looked at debt.
Oh, that's right, you all did.
Throughout the state. There was one county that was completely debt-free, and that was that was your county, Weld County. And it's amazing that the gift you have given your kids. You have built new highways there. You have built a new jail there. You have built infrastructure, and you paid cash. Explain that.
Yeah,
it's how did you pay cash?
We just, we made a concerted effort back in the 90s. We do have a lot of oil and gas in our county. But, you know, the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of oil and gas, booms and bust cycles. About 1996, we got tired of dealing with that and said, you know, we need a plan in place where we can level this out, because we were having issues. We had to cut a lot out of our budget during that time, because I was a county commissioner then. And that's when we made a concerted effort to say we need to get to debt free. And so we did. And it does. It's not like it happens overnight. It took about 5 or 6 years to get to debt free. Then we started lowering the mill levy, so reducing property taxes. So again, reducing the tax burden on our citizens.
And because of that, because of a pro-growth, pro-business feel, it's also one of the highest population growth counties in the country. People are going to Weld County.
And we keep reminding them it's because their taxes are less, you know, and we're going to keep it that way. But, you know, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's painful. You have to really take a concerted effort about not increasing programs. Unlike what we've done here in the state, unlike what we've done nationwide, you have to cut programs. You can't increase. When you do have good times and monies are coming in, you do one-time capital expenditures. You don't increase programs. You know, level of services needs to be commensurate with the tax revenues that are coming in. Not we're going to increase services and then go increase revenues.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way. So we are, I believe, the only county. We don't have a county sales tax. We've been able to reduce our property tax revenues. At the same time, we've reduced regulations. And at the same time, we have a zero debt county. I'm very proud of that. That's my track record.
Does that translate to being able to do it in Washington?
I believe so.
Why?
In fact, that was
a whole different ball game. There are much more special interests. You're not surrounded by a culture like Weld County.
Well, you know, you have to be very disciplined about it, and you have to have a vision and a plan, and then go execute and get it done. And if you can do it at a county level, we have a balanced budget at the state level. There's no reason why we don't have a balanced budget at the federal level.
I disagree. There is one reason, which is at the county level and the state level, we can't make money up out of thin air.
This is true.
We can't go into debt out of thin air. It has to balance. There's no such requirement in Washington, and you guys get to make money out of thin air.
Which is unfortunate that we get to just do it out of thin air. There should be more accountability there and more responsibility. But quite frankly, it takes discipline, and you just really have to go through and look at it and start making cuts.
What it takes is standing up to special interests.
Yes.
Because everybody has their pie. They need to have a bucket they need to get filled. And when you're in office, you don't hear from people who don't want to pay more in taxes. You hear from people who want to spend more. And it takes real discipline to do that. And
you've got to go back to that principle, which I believe we have as Republicans, which, you know, government's only supposed to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. So I get it. So we spend on, you know, transportation infrastructure. You know, in our state we spend on education. It's a constitutional requirement. There are certain things that government is supposed to do. So we should do that well and stop doing all the other things that we aren't supposed to be doing, that I can do for myself.
On a federal level, what should we spend less on?
I think we need to look at the entitlement programs and get a handle on them. I mean, back in the 90s, you know, the late 90s, we started with welfare reform. And we had, you know, time clocks on how long folks could stay on welfare reform. Right. We had job requirements. I think we need to get back to that. I think we need to look at the whole Medicaid situation.
Let's remember, it was a Democratic president who was finally bulled into signing that welfare reform.
And it was a Republican Congress.
And the Republican Congress sent it to him, wouldn't do it. Sent it to him, wouldn't do it. And finally the pressure got so bad. And it was one of the biggest parts of Clinton's legacy.
Absolutely.
Was putting welfare back into the states. And every state became a laboratory, and we're seeing innovation and
It
savings.
was remarkable what occurred here in Colorado.
It really was.
You know, caseload dropped. We were getting people back into jobs, getting them back into education so they could, you know, again, further their education and get to be prosperous, you know, have those opportunities, doors open kind of thing.
It's almost like people can solve their problems when government is closer to them than 2,000 miles away over there.
And it's almost like people can solve their problems when they're held accountable to solve their problems. right? So I think the other thing that we could look at again is the Medicaid situation. I've been talking with folks about maybe we put that into a block grant, same as what we did with the temporary aid to needy families, the welfare reform stuff, and even with our child welfare and looking at our child care programs as well. Looking at block grants and then having states say, this is what's best to serve our constituents. Here's the block of money. And that's exactly what happened back in the late 90s. Here's the block of money that comes to the state. States, you still have to match. You don't get to drop your match just because we're block granting it to you. But we're going to give you more flexibility to meet the needs of the residents in your state. And I think that's what we need to do with Medicaid.
Which meant the people of the state could go right to their state legislature and go, we need it here. No, we need it there. Mm-hmm. And they had more control.
And in this state, we have where it's basically gone down to the local level where counties actually implement these programs.
These things have to happen sooner or later. Mm-hmm. We're on a path where right now every American owes, $80,000 worth of... Oh, I'm sorry.
It's over 90,000.
Every man, every woman, every child. If we were going to pay off the debt that we have right now, we'd have to pay $90,000 each.
Yeah.
Each.
Yeah.
And, but that's not the biggest slice of the pie. People think that's all it would take. No, that's not what it would take, because the bigger part are the unfunded mandates of Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, VA, Social Security, the promises that people have made in office that cannot never be fulfilled are much more than the $90,000 per person. At some point, this blows up and it will be bad. It will be devastatingly bad. Will it happen while you and I are alive? Hope not. Will it happen when our kids are alive? Yeah, it will.
And I have 6 grandsons.
Makes a difference.
It does. You start thinking about, because honestly, I didn't need to run for this job. But, I start looking at my grandchildren thinking they do not have the same opportunities that I had or even my children had growing up in America. I mean, we are bankrupting this nation. We have gone so far off track in a 2-year period. In a 2-year period, we have just gone so far off track that now...
I would argue it's more like a 70-year period.
But over the last 2 years, it's just been exasperated. Maybe that's the best way of saying it, right? And, my grandchildren are from, ages 2 to 12. They deserve better. I grew up on a dairy farm, 4th-generation Coloradoan. And, our parents, I come from a very modest background. We were poor. We didn't even have indoor restroom facilities until I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Really?
Really. So we were
that
poor.
Just was because you weren't toilet trained, or
No. I have a large family. My great uncle lived with us. My grandmother lived with us. But we were taught at a very early age that when you work hard, you're rewarded, and opportunity comes your way.
Where were you raised?
North Jefferson County on a dairy farm. Yeah.
Can you still
everybody
milk a cow?
Talks about. Yeah, absolutely. I owned a dairy farm. We had a dairy farm for 15 years and some other farming operations. So, yeah, absolutely I can milk a cow without getting kicked.
What was the worst part about being a farmer?
It's every day, twice a day, all year long, but it's when it's so cold outside and it's that wet, sloshy cold and it's freezing temperatures and you still have to get up at 5 o'clock. I mean, my job when I was younger was, because, again, the farm was what we all survived on, right? I mean, my father had a job off the farm, but we all had to work on the farm. That was our job, because that's how we survived. And I had to get up and feed calves. So I can remember before going to school. And I went to Catholic school in Denver, so it's not like it was a short drive.
You're a Catholic school survivor too?
Well, for a few years. I ended up going to public school and graduating from public schools. But
me too.
Yeah, and anyways, getting up in that really cold weather, you've got to get up and go out and feed those calves.
What was the best part of growing up on a farm?
Freedom.
What do you mean?
Just the freedom that you have to just really, you can get up and go outside. You've got your farms. You know that you're working.
There was no helicopter parenting.
No, and it's that again back to that when you go do a job and get your job done, and you see that animal get raised, and then then you're milking the cows, and then you're selling them. I mean, so we ended up with. So my parents all didn't give us a heifer calf when we turned 9. We were all expected to be in 4-H, which is a great leadership program. And but they didn't give us a heifer calf. They sold us a heifer calf. They went and picked one out of the herd, said, "Here's your calf. It'll show, line up for showtime." but you owe us $100. And we were expected to pay that back. So we learned about debt. We learned about paying off our debt. And we all ended up growing our herd. We could only grow it to a certain extent because, again, it's a family farm that we were making a living off of. And I was able to sell my herd. I think I had ended up with 8 animals. I sold my herd when I was in high school and helped pay for my college.
Really?
So that's what you learn from farming. I mean, it's that kind of hard work, reward. You see it, you know how it goes, and
not for me.
Look, at the end, you didn't do any of that.
Oh,
well, you didn't grow up on a farm, did you?
I was a suburban kid. Oh, I was so lucky.
So you were busy out skateboarding or something,
I was
right?
too busy watching reruns of Star Trek. I had a much better existence than that. Hey, let's get back to, I want to talk to you about the campaign.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple things you're going to have to answer in this campaign. With the Roe versus Wade decision, you know, I know Democrats want to scare everybody that abortion is right around the corner. In Colorado,
it's a settled question.
It's a settled question in Colorado. It's not going to change in Colorado. It was legal before. It's illegal after. It's one of the few states where abortion is legal right up to birth,
up to and including delivery.
You're right. It's not. You can't get any more pro-abortion than Colorado already is. That being said, you're now going to Congress, and this will be the boogeyman for anybody running for Congress. The Colorado is obviously pretty pro-abortion when it comes to its voters. Every time there was a personhood amendment, it failed pretty largely. Even the last late-term abortion, to my surprise, failed by really big numbers. It was a sizable defeat. That surprised me. You're going to be asked over and over, well, are you going to protect a woman's right nationally? Now, it's already protected here in Colorado, but other women in other states want to know this, and it's going to affect how do you handle that?
Yeah, I've always been pro-life. As I just told you, I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and I've always been pro-life. Never ran from it. That's just who I am, and that's what I believe. And in this state, again, it's been a settled question. And we've had votes on it, you know, and I have always honored the vote of the people. Haven't tried to go out and go against it. Doesn't mean that, you know, I wouldn't go support some kind of ballot initiative. But again, you know, the Supreme Court came back and said that this is an issue that should be reserved to the states. And I think as of this point right now, that's where I'm at. That's where it needs to go. And that's what's happening. So, you know.
Let me push a little further on it.
Sure.
All true. But there will be bills to protect women in other states, and there will try to be some sort of federal protection. You're going to vote on that. How are you going to vote?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'll have to see the legislation. I mean, I'm one of those folks, man, I know I've been in the state legislature for 2 years. I'm one of those people that really, I do go through and try and read the bills, and I know that's probably going to be difficult at a federal level, at least given what's happened, you know, especially with the Democrats and what I've learned kind of thing. But
it's hard to read a 5,000-page bill.
It is. But, you know, there are people that go through and can help do research on the bill and look at the bill. But, you know, something of this nature, this importance, you know, I'm going to make sure that I've done my research, done my homework, and looked at the bill and have an understanding of what's in that bill.
Let me ask you some kind of generalized questions.
Sure.
There are those people who are anti-abortion in every circumstance.
Absolutely.
I think you're going to see some states, doesn't matter if it's incest, if it's rape, for the health of the mother, if the fetus is terminal to begin with or going to have a difficult life. Do you make any exceptions?
Or the life of the mother.
Life of the mother. Anything else?
No, that's it.
That's it, just life of the mother.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to swing with the voters of the 8th?
I think it will. And I say that because, again, it's 38% Hispanic. You know, a lot of my friends that I see in church, you know, kind of thing. So, and there's a large portion of this in Weld County, and I have a really good feel for where Weld County is at, and they know who I am, kind of thing. But, you know, I'm just saying that because when I've gone to the door, this issue hasn't come up. I know you all like to talk about it. I know, you know, my Democrat opponent will like to talk about it. But when you get out there and you start talking at the door with folks, they're not talking about this. They're talking about...
It's the Hail Mary pass.
Yes.
Because there's going to be a sea change this fall. There's no question in my mind. The economy is so bad. Our national reputation is so bad. Crime is so bad. This will be a sea change year. And if you're ever going to run as a Republican, it's a great year to do that. The Hail Mary is, can we scare people with abortion? And as you said, it's a settled question here.
Yeah, and I think the Democrats tried to do that already back in March and April of this year. And again, I'm out knocking on doors in March and April, and they're not talking about this at the door.
Yeah.
They're talking about border security. They're talking about inflation. There's nothing on the shelves kind of thing. I'm worried about my kids' education because after COVID, and I spent those 2 years totally engaged in my child's education. I know what they were being taught, what they weren't being taught. I know where their challenges are. I know where they're going to succeed. And so, that's what parents are talking about. They're talking about, look, I want to be able to be in charge of my child's education. And, I want to have that opportunity.
The other thing they're going to throw at you is violence, gun violence. That they're going to say, now is the time for federal legislation on gun control. And they're going to use these sad, terrible tragedies. Where are you going to be on that?
I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. Always have been, will remain that way as well. I'm also just a strong supporter of our Constitution. And, there are other portions of the Constitution like due process, the 14th Amendment that they like to infringe upon as well. And, and looking at this, I get it. We want to get guns out of the hands of bad guys. Okay. Let's talk about how do we do that? Because they passed a law, they meaning the federal legislators, passed a law, I think it was in 1995, gun-free zones.
Yep.
The school was a gun-free zone. That didn't stop that guy from walking in any of these schools. It didn't stop him, right? And it's not going to. Because it's just not.
I have a feeling when it comes to gun control that people want to feel safe.
They do.
People don't want to be safe. They want to feel safe, and gun-free zones make people feel safe.
But it's a false narrative. It's that smoke and mirrors. I guess you do maybe feel safe until something happens, and you're like, well, that didn't really work so well. So I think we also need to look at how do we, unfortunately, how do we harden our school facilities? We did it with other government buildings. Why aren't we doing it with schools?
Talk to me a little bit about border security. It was interesting that Biden ripped on Trump for his stay in Mexico policy and then didn't change it. It is...
Thank goodness.
I was going to call it a cluster something, but I won't do that. But our immigration system right now is in trouble. What is it you want to do with it?
We need to secure our border.
What does that mean?
It means we need to build the wall, and we need to secure our border and have an understanding of who's crossing that border. It's a national security issue.
Does that mean you're anti-immigration?
No. I think, folks should be able to come here and, my great-grandparents immigrated here, great-great-grandparents, whomever on both sides, they all immigrated here, but they came through and did it legally.
Would you expand the number of legal immigrants allowed into the country?
I'd have to really look at that and see what that means, because right now, when we talk about what's coming across our southern border, it's close to over 1 million people a year. And to put that in perspective, like we talked earlier, 721,000 people in District 8.
Right.
1 million people coming across the border. So we're just going to keep increasing districts? What are we going to do here? Kind of thing. So I think those are areas that we really need to dive into and, look at and figure out what we can do. But we do need to secure the border. The other issue that's occurring at our border is the drug trafficking that's coming across. Besides the humanitarian crisis that we have at the border, children crossing maybe without their family. Who knows kind of thing that's going on there. But the fentanyl situation that we have going on in this state, where we've had a 382% increase in the last 2 years of the number of deaths. We're number 2 in the nation. We don't want to be number 1 either, right? And so, we know that, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. And China produces it, sends it to Mexico, and they walk it right across the border. That's the kind of stuff we need to stop. That's why we need to secure the border. That needs to be one of our first things that we do. When you debate your opponent, yes, what do you want to hold her to? What is the thing you'd like to ask her to? I'm going to hold her accountable for the legislation that she's passed. She's no better than Jared Polis. She's no better than Joe Biden. She was a co-prime sponsor on Senate Bill 181, which destroyed the oil and gas industry and killed thousands of jobs. She was a co-prime sponsor on the unionization of farm workers, the agricultural farm worker bill, during a time when our farmers just had barely made it through COVID, were in a drought, Their expenses are going through the roof because of gas and diesel and fertilizer all increasing. They're barely going to make it by. And she decides it's a great idea. Let's go in and unionize farm workers, which was, their examples that they used just aren't even true when they used them down at the Capitol.
You have no farming experience.
Yeah, exactly. And this district is huge on agriculture. I mean, it's huge on agriculture. So I'm going to hold her accountable for those types of things. I'm going to hold her accountable for what she did on fentanyl. In 2019, she signed on as one of the sponsors of a bill that basically increased possession of up to 4 grams of fentanyl, methane, heroin, and opioids. Cocaine is the other one. Up to
Not
4
methane.
grams.
I think you mean methamphetamine.
Methamphetamine, sorry, meth. I should just say it, stick it meth. But thank you. And cocaine up to 4 grams. That's, low level.
Enough to kill about 1,000 people.
Well, that's low level drug distribution. And that's what law enforcement told us. So we tried to fix that this year. I mean, we had the police chief from Denver, from the city and county of Denver, after the 5 deaths that occurred in Commerce City, which is in District 8. It's in our district. After those 5 deaths, the chief of police in Denver was in the news saying that the legislative body was complicit in leaving these drug dealers on the street. In other words, we were complicit in those deaths, is what he was saying. Yet we basically don't take care of the issue. And she was silent on this issue. So I'm going to hold her accountable for her votes. That's what I'm going to do. I'm looking forward to it.
What do you think she's going to hold you to? What do you think she's going to try to get you on?
Oh, I think she is probably going to go after me because they've already started about the 51st state and the succession idea. And
yeah, I remember and for people who don't remember that, it was a real sign of frustration that the war on rural Colorado was so ugly between gun laws and anti-oil and gas laws and anti-ranching and anti-farming that some of you crazy commissioners had a fun idea saying, maybe we ought to talk about seceding from Colorado and starting our own state.
The idea actually came from our citizens, and we had several, town halls across our county, back when you had those in person. And we had several people come out and say, yeah, we want to vote on this. Because we asked them, do you want us to proceed with this or not? We're not going to go look into it if the vote is no. And that's what ended up happening. But you're right. People were so frustrated. I mean, there were laws that were being passed, like with regard to the renewable energy side of things and the percentage that, rural electric associations had to have, REAs had to have, but not suburban municipalities. So Colorado Springs is under a different criteria than the rest of the state. Boulder, all of them, they're under a different criteria than the rest of the state. It's more stringent mandates on us, right, out in the rural parts of the state.
The idea made a lot of national news. A lot of people snickered at it. I was intrigued by it. If I recall, you didn't push it, you asked the people.
That's correct.
What did the people say?
In our county, in my commissioner district, they said yes, but in our county, they said no.
Oh, really?
And
That's interesting.
That was in 2013, and we remember the major flooding that we had as well. So I think that just kind of changed things around and kind of, we lost a little bit of momentum there, but there just was so much frustration that we weren't being listened to, and that Denver, and Governor Hickenlooper at the time. I just got done telling you about where the setback stuff came and the taking of private property rights. That was during that time frame when they were taking our energy and mineral impact grants that are supposed to be used in those areas that are impacted by energy development and moving it into the metro areas. That's frustration. When they tell you that CDOT isn't going to plow the snow on rural highways, because what? We don't matter? When we were having a drought, prior to the flood, we were in a drought situation. Right. And we were having all those fires, remember, that were going on prior to 2013 when this was occurring? And it was okay to go take water out of high mountain reservoirs to put out the fires. It wasn't okay. Governor Hickenlooper wouldn't do anything with regard to the drought situation in Will County, the #1 agricultural county in the state, and crops are literally dying in the field. Wouldn't do anything and wouldn't call that an emergency. So it's things of that nature where it's like you just don't get it. And it was like they weren't listening. And I will say this, in defense of Governor Hickenlooper, he wasn't happy with us. He wasn't happy with the commissioners, and there were 11 counties, and there were several counties beyond that in rural Colorado that were talking about it, wanted to see how it was going to go at that election. But I will say this, Governor Hickenlooper that December at our Colorado Counties, our commissioners conference that we have down in Colorado Springs every year, or that we had in Colorado Springs every year, he came to that and he stood up and he answered and he said, I think it made the state stronger. Certainly these counties are stronger and I need to lean in and listen better. And so, I think there was a good result from it. And I think, again, I'm going to commend him for coming around and saying, look, it did make our state stronger, and it means I've got to listen better.
All right, let me leave you with one last question.
Sure.
This I term the drunk driving question. Is there something that you think is going to pop up in this campaign? This is the hooker in your trunk question that's going to pop up, and now
I have one. But
and
anyway,
and this is a good time to get ahead of it now and go. I probably shouldn't have gone streaking around the state capitol that one time last year.
I didn't do that either.
That's anything you want to tell us that?
I think I've been pretty battle tested. I ran 2 years ago for the state senate and had some fairly negative stuff come out. Where it's not accurate. I mean, even in the primary this year, I had Nancy Pelosi and her PAC and another Democrat PAC go out and prop up one of my opponents, saying they're the real conservative kind of thing. And I had a couple of my opponents that did some negative campaigning, not as dramatic as it was a couple of years ago. But so I think I'm fairly well battle tested, and I think I know I can justify my votes, and I can answer very truthfully as to what's occurred and how it's occurred, and I feel good about it. I've always had this test as a elected official that, if you can't go home and look yourself in the mirror, you probably shouldn't be doing it, right? If your children would be embarrassed by what you've done, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So try to live by that test.
If that were the case, I wouldn't be doing anything.
I know. Well, that's you. But, I don't know that you're elected. So, but, you really got to be able to look yourself in the face, and you need to be able to justify your votes, and I feel like I can.
Barb Kirkmeyer, thanks for spending the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the time. I appreciate it, too. It's great.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.